When I saw Clara standing at the end of that church aisle, wearing the same white lace veil I'd once seen hanging in my daughter's closet, I felt something twist deep inside my chest. Not pride, not joy, but something close to confusion, maybe even dread. My son Daniel looked radiant beside her. He had that nervous smile every groom wears, shoulders too stiff, hands clenched around the bouquet, eyes darting toward the door as if checking she hadn't changed her mind. But my eyes weren't on Daniel. They were fixed on Clara, my daughter's best friend, the girl who had practically grown up in my house, the girl I once drove to high school dances, helped through her heartbreaks, and held when her mother passed away. Now she was about to marry my son. And though everyone around me whispered about how beautiful she looked, I couldn't shake the cold thought pressing at the back of my mind. What was Clara hiding from us? Before that day, life had been, as I used to say, quietly predictable. Our family lived in a neat yellow house on a suburban street where everyone watered their lawns at the same hour. I'd been a widow for nearly 10 years, raising my 2 children with the kind of protective love only loss can teach you. Daniel, my eldest, was calm, methodical, and kind. He'd become an architect, steady, dependable, and cautious in everything. My daughter, Melissa, was the opposite. All color and chaos. She laughed loudly, cried easily, and loved fiercely. And for as long as I could remember, there was Clara. Clara was Melissa's shadow, always one step behind her, but somehow glowing brighter. She had an easy charm, a quick wit, and a warmth that drew people in. I'd first met her when she was 12, wearing ripped jeans and a smile too wide for her small face. She'd knocked on our door, asking if Melissa could come out and help build a fairy house in the backyard. Over the years, she became more like a second daughter than a guest. I made her favorite pancakes on weekends, helped her pick prom dresses, even lent her my pearls for her graduation. When her mother died suddenly during Clara's first year of college, it was Melissa who stayed with her for nights on end, and me who held her when she broke down at the funeral. So when Daniel came home one Christmas and said, "Mom, there's someone I want you to meet," and Clara walked in, my heart stuttered. I remember blinking, trying to make sense of it. "Clara?" I said. "You mean Melissa's Clara?" She smiled, shy but confident. "Yes, ma'am." "Guess, I'm your Clara now, too." The words were meant to be sweet, I think, but something about them didn't sit right with me. The weeks that followed were awkward. Melissa tried to be supportive, but I could see the tightness around her eyes when she smiled. She had always been protective of Clara, proud of their sisterhood, and now, that bond had been rewritten in a way neither of them knew how to navigate. I did what mothers do best. I pretended everything was fine. "Love finds its way," I said over dinner one evening, though the words tasted like chalk. Still, I couldn't help noticing small things. When I asked Claire about her life after college, she brushed past details. "Things have been complicated," she'd say, "but I'm good now." When I offered to help with wedding planning, she declined politely. "I want to surprise everyone," she said with that familiar bright smile. And when Daniel spoke about her, his eyes glowed, but his answers were vague. "She's been through a lot," he said once. "I just want to give her peace." Peace. The word echoed in my mind long after. Peace from what? A few months before the wedding, I found myself sorting through old boxes in the attic. It was late, the kind of humid evening where the air feels thick enough to drink. In one of Melissa's old school boxes, tucked between yearbooks and glitter glue, I found a photo strip, Clara at 17, holding a baby. At first, I smiled. She'd always adored kids. Maybe it was a cousin. But something about her eyes, that fierce protectiveness, the way she held that tiny child close, almost possessive, made my stomach tighten. There was no date written, no name, just for my little star. I set it aside, intending to ask her about it later. But when I mentioned it casually over tea, she froze. "Where did you see that?" she asked, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. "In an old box from Melissa's room," I said. "It was just a photo. I must have left it there ages ago," she interrupted quickly, forcing a smile. "That was my cousin's baby." Her hands trembled slightly as she set down her cup. And that was that. She changed the topic, asking about Daniel's favorite childhood stories. Still, that night I dreamed of a crying baby and of Clara walking away with her arms full. By the time the wedding day came, I told myself I was imagining things. The church smelled of lilies and beeswax candles. Daniel's smile was wide, and Clara looked radiant. But as the vows began, I saw a flicker across her face, like she was remembering something painful. When the priest asked if anyone had reason to object, my heart thumped once, hard. Of course, no one spoke. They kissed, and applause filled the church. I tried to clap, but my palms felt damp, my throat dry. Because deep down, I knew something wasn't finished. And I was right. The secret came 3 months later, wrapped in a desperate phone call, a trembling voice, and a truth that would rip our family open. It was a Wednesday evening when the call came. Rain tapped against the kitchen window in slow, uneven beats, and I was halfway through folding laundry when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was Clara. Her voice sounded small, almost childlike, the same tone she used to have when she'd call me Auntie May years ago. "Mom, can you come over?" she whispered. "Please, don't tell Daniel." For a moment, I didn't move. My fingers froze mid-fold, clutching one of Daniel's shirts like a lifeline. "Is everything okay?" I asked carefully. Silence. Then a shaky breath. "No, it's not." The line went dead before I could ask more. I drove over in the dark, the wipers struggling against the thick rain. Their apartment was small, one of those newly built complexes with glass balconies and thin walls that carried every sound. When Clara opened the door, her eyes were swollen and red. She looked exhausted, her hair unbrushed, her clothes wrinkled. "Clara, what happened?" I asked, stepping in. She closed the door quietly behind me and leaned against it, as though she needed the wood to hold her up. "I can't do this anymore," she said softly. "I thought I could, but I can't." I guided her to the couch, heart pounding. "Can't do what?" Her lips trembled. "Lie." I waited. I didn't push. I just sat beside her, the sound of rain filling the silence between us. Then she whispered it, so quietly I almost missed it. "I have a child." The words hung in the air, fragile and heavy all at once. My breath caught. "You what?" She turned to me, eyes glossy with tears. "A daughter. Her name's Lily. She's 6. 6. That meant she'd been born right before Clara finished college, right before she came back into our lives. I opened my mouth, but no words came. I could only stare at her, watching guilt flicker across her face like lightning. "I didn't mean to hide her forever," she said. I didn't know how. Daniel's so good, so honest. I thought he'd never want me if he knew." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "And Melissa?" I asked quietly. "Did she know?" Clara looked away. "She was there when I gave birth. She promised to keep it secret." My pulse roared in my ears. "My daughter knew?" Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Please don't blame her. She thought she was protecting me." I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the echo of betrayal from both sides. A child. A hidden child. All those years. All those smiles at family dinners, the carefully planned wedding, and she'd been keeping a daughter a secret from all of us. Where is she now? I managed, with my aunt in another town. I send money every month, but it's getting harder. I can't keep pretending Daniel and I might start a family when I already have one. Clara's voice broke on that last word. I sat there, stunned. And then, as strange as it sounds, I didn't feel anger first. I felt sadness. Because beneath her deception, I saw fear. The kind of fear that makes a young woman hide parts of herself to be loved. The kind of fear I once had, too. I reached for her hand. "Clara, you have to tell him." She shook her head violently. "He'll leave me." "You don't know that." "I do," she said. "He wants a fresh start, a clean, simple life. I've already taken that from him." Her voice cracked again. "You can't build a marriage on a lie," I said softly. Secrets don't stay buried, Clara. They just rot. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. For the first time, I realized how small she looked. Not the confident young woman who'd charmed my family, but the broken girl who once sat at my kitchen table eating pancakes after her mother's funeral. I stayed with her that night until she fell asleep on the couch, her breath uneven but steady. When I left, the rain had stopped, but something inside me hadn't. I didn't tell Daniel. Not yet. 4 days I wrestled with it, torn between loyalty and truth. I'd raised my children to be honest, but I also knew that sometimes honesty destroys as much as it heals. Clara avoided me after that night. She texted polite updates. We're fine. Daniel's busy with work. Thank you for coming by, but her messages felt like walls. Then one Sunday, Daniel came over alone. Mom, he said, sitting at the kitchen table. Is Clara mad at you? Why would you think that? He shrugged. She's been distant. Quiet lately. I don't know, something's off. I wanted to tell him everything right then, but I didn't. Because sometimes the truth needs to be handled carefully like glass. So I asked instead, do you love her? He looked surprised. Of course I do. Why? I smiled faintly. Then promise me something. Whatever happens, listen before you judge. He frowned, puzzled, but nodded. You're scaring me, Mom. I just want you to be kind, I said. It was 2 weeks later that everything fell apart. I was at home, baking muffins for the church fundraiser, when my phone buzzed again. This time, a call from Melissa. Her voice was frantic. Mom, you need to come. It's about Clara. I dropped the spoon. What happened? She's at the hospital. My heart stopped. Is she hurt? No, Melissa said, her breath shaking. She wasn't in an accident, but Daniel found out about the child. My knees nearly gave out. Who told him? I don't know, Melissa whispered. He's furious. He told her to leave the house. The line went quiet, except for the distant hum of hospital machines. She's been crying nonstop, Melissa continued. She says she doesn't know where to go. I grabbed my keys. I'm on my way. When I walked into the hospital waiting area, I saw her, Clara, sitting on a plastic chair, clutching a hospital wristband and a crumpled tissue. Her face was pale, eyes swollen, hands trembling. Clara, I said softly. She looked up, startled, then whispered, he knows. What did he say? He told me he can't trust me anymore, she said, her voice breaking. That everything between us was a lie. I wanted to defend her, to fix it, to patch the cracks in a story that had already split open. But all I could do was sit beside her, just as I had the night she confessed. And in that sterile, too bright room, I knew there was no hiding anymore. The truth was out, and now everyone would have to live with it. That night, the hospital waiting room felt like a confessional, the kind that forces you to speak truths you've buried too deep for too long. Clara sat beside me, silent, staring at the cracks in the linoleum floor. Her wedding ring, the one Daniel had picked with such care, was gone from her finger. They said my blood pressure spiked. She murmured finally. Stress, the doctor said. But it's not stress. It's guilt. I reached out, resting my hand over hers. He's hurt, Clara, but that doesn't mean it's over. She shook her head, a bitter laugh catching in her throat. He'll never forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me. Maybe, I said softly, but he deserves to understand why you hit her. Her eyes filled again, brimming with tears she couldn't seem to blink away. It's not that simple. If I tell him everything, he'll hate me more. Then tell me, I said gently. Tell me everything. For a moment, she hesitated. Then the words poured out like water breaking through a dam. She had gotten pregnant in her final year of college. The father was a teaching assistant, older, charming, and married. When she found out, she told him. He panicked, promised to handle it, then disappeared. Her mother was already sick then, battling cancer. Clara couldn't bear to burden her. She only told one person, Melissa. I didn't know what to do, she said, her voice trembling. I was 21, broke, terrified. I hid the pregnancy under big sweaters, lied about a gap semester, and moved in with my aunt 2 towns over. She helped me through it. And your mother never knew? She died before I could tell her. The tears came again, harder this time. After Lily was born, I couldn't give her up, but I couldn't raise her either. So my aunt did. I sent money when I could. And when Melissa invited me to her graduation, I went just for a day. That's when I saw Daniel again. She laughed softly, shaking her head. He was kind, just like always. He looked at me like I was still worth something. I wanted that feeling again, to be seen as good. So you built your life on silence, I said quietly. She nodded. I thought I could keep it separate, just until I figured out how to tell him. But the longer I waited, the harder it became. Every time I looked at him, I felt like a fraud. Her words lingered in the sterile air, heavy and human. Later that evening, Melissa arrived. She looked anxious, her hair pulled into a messy bun, her eyes darting between us. Mom, she said, Daniel's outside. He doesn't want to come in. Clara stiffened beside me. I can't face him. Yes, you can, I said firmly. You must. It's time. Melissa looked at me, guilt flickering in her expression. I tried to convince her to tell him years ago, she whispered. But she was scared. I didn't know how to help without betraying her. I squeezed her hand. You were trying to protect her. I understand. Then I turned to Clara. You can't protect him from the truth anymore. Go. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. When Daniel walked in, his jaw was tight, his eyes red-rimmed. He didn't look at her at first, just at the floor. Daniel, I said gently, sit down. He did, but his body was tense, as though any movement might shatter him. I'm sorry, Clara began, voice breaking. I should have told you long ago. He looked up, anger flaring. You lied to me. Every day. Every word. I didn't want to lose you. You lost me the second you decided I didn't deserve the truth, he snapped. You had a child, Clara. Do you understand what that means? Her hands shook. Yes. Every night I understand. I think about her when you ask about starting a family. I think about her when we sit at the dinner table pretending everything's perfect. Daniel's voice cracked. You used to tell me honesty was everything. I know, she whispered. And I failed you. The room went quiet except for the sound of distant monitors beeping. Then Daniel's tone softened, just slightly. Where is she now? With my aunt, Clara said. Her name's Lily. Something flickered in his expression. Confusion, heartbreak, something too human to name. You should have trusted me, he said finally, standing up. I would have accepted her. I would have tried. I know, she whispered. I was just too ashamed to believe it. He left then, didn't shout, didn't slam the door. Just walked out, shoulders heavy, leaving the kind of silence that settles deep into the bones. That night, I drove Clara home. She sat in the passenger seat staring out the window, her reflection blurred by raindrops. When we reached the apartment, she turned to me. Do you think he'll ever forgive me? I thought about my son, the boy who always followed the rules, who measured truth like it was a blueprint. I think he'll need time, I said softly. But forgiveness, that's not just for him to give. It's for you to earn. She nodded, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. Then I'll earn it, she whispered, even if it takes the rest of my life. The next morning, I woke to a message from Daniel. I'm staying at a friend's for a while. Don't worry about me. Please don't take sides. And I didn't. Because this wasn't about choosing sides anymore. It was about untangling years of silence, one truth at a time. Still, that night, I found myself thinking of the photo strip, the one of Clara holding the baby. I pulled it from the drawer and traced the faint words written on the back. For my little star, always. It struck me then, love, in its truest form, isn't about hiding what's broken. It's about learning to face it, together or not at all. 2 weeks later, a small envelope arrived at my door. Inside was a single photo. A little girl, about 6, with Clara's wide brown eyes and Daniel's gentle smile, though he'd never met her. On the back, a note in Clara's handwriting. Her name is Lily May. I thought you should meet your granddaughter, even if only this way. I sat there, holding that photo until the edges softened in my hands. A part of me ached for Daniel, for the life he thought he had. But another part of me felt something unexpected. Hope. Because truth, once spoken, has a way of making room for new beginnings, even if they come slowly. It took Daniel nearly a month to come back home. In that time, Clara called twice, both times brief, both times ending with silence that said more than words could. She didn't beg or plead. She simply asked how he was and if he'd eaten. The rest was unspoken. I watched from a distance, knowing some wounds need space to breathe before they can heal. But that didn't stop my heart from breaking a little more each day. One evening, as I was watering the small garden behind my house, I heard the familiar sound of Daniel's car pulling into the driveway. The engine idled for a few moments before shutting off. When he finally stepped out, he looked different. Tired, thinner, older somehow. But there was something calmer in his eyes. The kind of calm that comes after a storm, when you've accepted that the world won't go back to what it was. "Mom," he said quietly. I put down the watering can. "You're home." He nodded, shoving his hands into his jacket pockets. "Just for tonight." "Of course," I said. "There's food inside." We sat at the kitchen table, just like we used to when he was a boy. I'd made stew, the kind with thick broth and slow-cooked vegetables, his favorite. He didn't eat much, just pushed the food around with his spoon. Finally, he spoke. "I went to see her." My hand froze midair. "Clara?" "No." "The little girl. Lily." I felt my breath catch. "You met her?" He nodded. "Clara arranged it. She asked if I'd like to know her." I didn't answer at first. Then one night, I just drove to the address she gave me. He paused, a faint tremor in his voice. She was playing in the yard. A pink tricycle, tiny helmet too big for her head. She looked up and waved like she already knew me. A small, wistful smile touched his lips. She called me Mr. Daniel. "What did you do?" I just sat on the porch with her aunt, watched her draw flowers with chalk on the steps. She told me her favorite color was purple and that she wanted to be a nurse like her mom. "She doesn't know who I am. Not yet." His eyes glistened. But when she laughed, "Mom," it felt like something broke and healed inside me all at once. I reached across the table, taking his hand. Sometimes forgiveness starts before we even realize we've given it. He nodded slowly. "Maybe, but I don't know if I can go back to the way things were." "You don't have to," I said. "You just have to decide what kind of future you want and who belongs in it." He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "She lied, Mom, about something so big. How do you build trust again after that?" "You don't rebuild the old trust," I said softly. "You build a new one, on truth this time." He looked at me, eyes weary but searching. "Do you think she deserves that?" I thought of Clara's trembling hands in the hospital, of the note she'd written me, of the quiet courage it took to face her past. "Yes," I said finally. "I think she's trying." A week later, Daniel asked me to come with him to Clara's apartment. I didn't ask questions. I just went. When we arrived, Clara opened the door before we even knocked. Her face was pale but hopeful, her eyes swollen from sleepless nights. "Daniel," she breathed. He nodded slightly. "Can we talk?" She stepped aside, letting us in. The apartment was tidy, almost painfully so, the kind of cleanliness born from nervous energy. A half-empty cup of tea sat on the counter, still warm. They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. I stayed quiet, near the doorway, ready to leave if they needed privacy. Daniel started first. "I met Lily." Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "You did." He nodded. "She's incredible." Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't think you'd ever want to." "I didn't," he said quietly. "Not at first. But then I realized I couldn't keep hating someone who hadn't done anything wrong." She looked down, fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. "I wanted to tell you 100 times. I know," he interrupted softly. "You were scared. I get it now, but that doesn't make it okay." "I know." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I don't know what we are anymore, Clara. Husband and wife. Strangers trying to remember why they fell in love. She gave a small, broken laugh. Maybe both. He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. I don't want to make promises I can't keep, but I want to try. For her. For us. Her breath hitched. You'd really? He nodded. I'll take it one day at a time. No lies. No walls. She reached across the table, trembling. I can do that. As I watched them, I realized something that struck deep. Love doesn't vanish when it's betrayed. It lingers bruised but alive, waiting for honesty to nurse it back. When we left that night, Clara hugged me tightly. Thank you, she whispered, for not giving up on us. I smiled. You saved yourself, dear. You just needed to believe you could. Months passed, and the quiet between them slowly turned into conversation. Clara invited Daniel to meet Lily again, this time as her uncle. It was a small step, but an honest one. I went with them once, standing at a distance while Lily ran across the yard to show Daniel a drawing she'd made. It was a stick figure family, a woman, a man, and a little girl holding hands. Underneath, in messy crayon letters, she'd written, Me and Mommy and Uncle D. Daniel knelt down and smiled. It's beautiful, Lily. And for the first time in a long while, his smile looked real. That night, as I drove home, I thought about how life doesn't always mend the way we expect. Some tears never quite disappear. They just weave into the fabric of who we become. Clara and Daniel still had a long road ahead, but for the first time, they were walking it together, with truth as their guide instead of fear. And me, I'd found something too, a quiet reminder that forgiveness, when it comes, rarely arrives as thunder. It comes softly, like dawn through the curtains, warming what was cold. 2 years later, the rhythm of life found its balance again. Not perfect, but steady. Daniel and Clara had moved into a small house on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom cottage with a white fence and rose bushes Clara had planted herself. Lily visited often, sometimes for a few days, sometimes for a week when her aunt needed rest. I remember the first time I went over for Sunday dinner after they settled in. Clara had cooked roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and corn on the cob. Lily was setting the table with mismatched napkins, humming a song from a cartoon. When she saw me at the door, she ran up, her tiny arms wrapping around my waist. Grandma May, she giggled. The name caught me by surprise. I looked at Clara, who smiled nervously. She started calling you that after seeing your picture, Clara said. I hope that's okay. I knelt and hugged the little girl back. It's more than okay, sweetheart. There it was, a kind of full circle I hadn't expected. Over dinner, laughter mingled with the clinking of plates. It wasn't the same as before, but maybe it wasn't supposed to be. It was gentler now, like everyone was learning how to handle the fragile gift of peace. Daniel seemed lighter too. He'd started teaching art classes at a local school, something he'd always wanted to do, but never dared. Clara was working part-time as a nurse again, slowly rebuilding her life without the shadows that once held her down. After dessert, when Lily ran off to play with her dolls, I stayed back to help Clara with the dishes. She glanced over her shoulder and said quietly, I still think about how much I hurt him and you. I set a plate aside. You can't change what happened, Clara, but you've taken responsibility. That's more than most do. She nodded, her eyes misty. Sometimes I wonder if I deserve this peace. You do, I said softly, because you chose honesty when it mattered most. That's what makes peace real. A few months later, something unexpected happened. One morning, Clara called me in tears, but this time, they were tears of joy. May, she said, her voice trembling. Lily's aunt has decided to let us adopt her. I nearly dropped my teacup. Oh, Clara, she said Lily deserves stability, and she can see how much Daniel loves her. I could hear the emotion breaking through her words. We're going to be her parents, May. Officially. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, court visits, and anxious waiting. Daniel threw himself into it. not as an obligation, but as a calling. When the day finally came, we all dressed up and went to the courthouse. Lily wore a little lavender dress and a ribbon in her hair. The judge asked her if she was happy with the decision. She looked at Daniel, then Clara, then me, and nodded with a shy smile. "Very happy," she said. I couldn't hold back my tears. That night, they invited a few close friends and neighbors over for dinner. Daniel stood at the table, glass raised. "To family," he said. "Not the kind we're born into, but the kind we build, with love, with truth, with forgiveness." Everyone clapped softly, and Clara leaned against his shoulder, smiling in that quiet, peaceful way only she could. As the night wound down, I went outside for some air. The sky was velvet black, scattered with stars. From inside, I could hear Lily's laughter and Clara's voice calling her to bed. Daniel joined me, leaning on the porch railing. "It's strange," he said. "Sometimes I still wake up thinking it was all a dream. The pain, the lies, the rebuilding. And now?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Now I just feel grateful. For second chances. For grace." I nodded. "That's what life's about, Daniel. Learning that broken things can still be beautiful." The years have a way of softening even the sharpest memories. Lily grew fast. Too fast if you ask me. By the time she turned 8, she was reading chapter books, helping Clara bake cookies, and painting pictures just like Daniel used to as a child. Sometimes she'd come over and stay with me for the weekend. We'd bake, watch old movies, and she'd ask endless questions about when Mommy and Daddy met. I always smiled. "That's a long story, dear. Maybe one day, your parents will tell it themselves." She'd grin, content with the mystery. One evening, years later, Daniel and Clara invited me to dinner again, this time with an announcement. Clara waited until after dessert before she placed her hand over Daniel's and said, "May, I'm pregnant." My breath caught. Oh, Clara, tears stung my eyes as I got up and hugged her. "After everything you've both been through, this is such a blessing." Daniel smiled through misty eyes. "We wanted you to be the first to know." I held them both close, feeling the circle of forgiveness complete itself in that moment. The pain that once divided us had turned into something whole, a family that had rebuilt itself from truth and love. Months later, when the baby was born, a boy they named Ethan, I held him in my arms, and I swear I felt time pause. Tiny fingers, soft breaths, the smell of new life. I looked at Clara, exhausted but glowing, and whispered, "You did it, my dear. You turned your pain into love." She smiled weakly. "No, Mai." "We did." Now, years have passed. Lily is in high school, Ethan's starting grade school, and I'm an old woman sitting by the window, writing this story for you. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still see that first dinner, the tension, the fear, the silence. And then I see what came after. Laughter, forgiveness, and the sound of Lily calling me Grandma May. People think love stories are only about romance. But I've learned the truest ones are about redemption, about facing the truth, standing in it, and choosing love anyway. When I look back on everything that happened, the secrets, the heartbreak, the forgiveness, I realize something I wish I'd known years ago. Love isn't always clean or easy. Sometimes it arrives tangled in pain, in choices we regret, in truths we were too afraid to tell. Clara's secret nearly destroyed my family. It tore open wounds we didn't even know we had. But in the end, that same truth became the seed of something honest, something worth rebuilding. You see, life has a strange way of testing us. It puts us through storms not to break us, but to strip away what's false, so only what's real can remain. And sometimes, what's real is forgiveness. Not the kind that forgets, but the kind that lets you breathe again. I used to think justice meant seeing someone pay for their mistakes. But as I've grown older, I've learned that true justice is peace, knowing that you've chosen love over bitterness, truth over resentment. When I see Clara now, holding Ethan on her lap, laughing while Lily helps her bake cookies, I don't see the woman who lied. I see the woman who learned to be brave enough to tell the truth, even when it cost her everything. And I see my son, who learned that strength isn't in anger, but in the quiet courage to try again. If you've ever been betrayed, or if you've ever carried a secret that felt too heavy to tell, I hope this story reminds you that it's never too late to make things right. Healing doesn't erase the past, but it gives you a future that's lighter to carry. Because in the end, love isn't proven by perfection. It's proven by what survives after the storm. So tell me, if you were in my place, would you have forgiven her? Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this one.